Thank you very much, and thank you as well for your beautiful contributions. It's a real honor to be here, and deeply grateful as well for the space and for the work that has been done on this conversation. And it's a conversation that's very deep to my heart, but it's also a conversation I believe in the business community we've actually had for a very, very long time and have not been able to move past a certain point. And I want to start actually by sharing an article that I read recently in a newspaper, and it was an article that covered an interview with a well-known entrepreneur. And this entrepreneur was giving his view on the younger generation. And he was saying that, either we're between looking as youth as sort of aimless and sort of wild people, only looking for a good time, or we sort of paint them as this picture of they're already remaking the world and that they are the world. And that actually, it's a very superficial sometimes debate. We need to go deeper. And that sort of young people are studying to become leaders in industry, not for wealth purposes, but so that they believe that they can make the world a safer and happier place. And he sort of says that, he believes that young people are already shouting out what they don't want in the world. They don't want war, they don't want poverty, and actually finishes with something that sort of deeply touches me, that actually what we really need in the business community is to look at our relations between the younger and the older generations. And this sort of sentiment deeply touches me, but I think what's also incredible is that in fact this article and this newspaper was from 1929. And the entrepreneur in question was someone by the name of Henry Ford, who would later go on and change the world. And this sort of struck me that, and the reason why I read newspapers from 1929 is a whole other talk itself. But actually, I wanted to bring this up because it appears that the millennial story is actually the story. It is the story for every single young generation, at least in the past 2 centuries, that has come and has tried to find its place on an ancient earth and how the modern world relates to us. And that generation that Ford talked about was actually dragged into World War II 10 years later and did not actually meet the potential he believed they had to end war and poverty. So in the business community, what can we actually do to prevent sort of this generational waste almost, and actually to fulfill our promise as a generation that we believe we have? And I have sort of 2 very humble contributions to that. The first, so I co-founded a consultancy in 2010 alongside my sister. And in the work that we do to make business as a force for good, I'm often very disheartened actually with looking at some of the research that's done on millennials and by companies and multinational organizations. I've read far too many research reports on understanding millennials to optimize your talent strategy, rather than how do we actually understand millennials to assist their evolution as human beings and to bring out their deepest and most profound gifts. I've read far too many reports talking about how do you communicate with millennials, rather than how do you truly understand young people and how do you create that space for them within organizations. I've read far too many articles and reports as well about how do you nurture a loyalty of millennials towards your company and sort of retain them. Whereas I think what we should be talking about is how do we nurture a loyalty of millennials towards the earth and actually each other as a human family. Far too many reports actually looking at sort of public-private partnerships and less on public-planet partnerships, and where actually millennials fit into that kind of discourse. And it's something that deeply troubles me because I think our issue in the business community is actually far too often, and of course these reports have their place and they are important, but I believe we've been looking at the surface rather than the roots of actually what a human being can mean and what they fit into the larger picture. So my call actually to the business community when it comes to this is that we should intrinsically shift what we value in young people, and by nature what we value in ourselves. Actually think about what do we actually place our value in. And the second call that I'd like to make is in relation to the intergenerational perspective that we sort of talked about. And often I feel very uncomfortable as a millennial when we talk about the general millennial discourse. And it seems very excluding, actually, of elders, of sort of parents, of sort of older generations. And it worries me because I think about my parents. I think about sort of all these brilliant sort of elders who've been there for me. And we talk almost as if millennials are the only ones who want work that is purposeful, that millennials are the only ones who want work that is meaningful, that millennials are the only ones who want work that is sort of a work-life balance. when in fact I think every single generation grew up wanting that meaning and strove for that meaning in their lives. And I do not think that can be disregarded. And I think about my mother, for example. So she's in her 60s, was a banker her whole life, and now quit everything to start a raw food business. I think about a sort of very dear mentor who was a partner in a big consultancy for 30 years, and at the age of 80 started a social enterprise to help orphan children, which he believes is his true life calling. I think about people in this very room who I know quit their jobs actually midlife and quit their careers and were brave enough to do that to find their deeper calling. And I bring this up because I think that us as a millennial generation, we are not able to fulfill our potential unless our elders do so as well. They go hand in hand, and we should be working together. And you know, no one corporation, no one individual, no one generation is able to solve the huge issues we face into the front of us. This requires collective action. This requires action together over a very long period of time. And in that relating, there's a teaching that comes actually from the Buddhist community that sort of deeply resonates with me. And it's that the next Buddha actually may not be an individual, but actually that the next Buddha can come probably in the form of a community. And that is a community of loving kindness. And actually that is truly what the world needs right now. And the best organizations that I've seen at affecting sort of social issues operate in that way, which are ants and bees. And they're fantastic at solving social issues. And I believe that this story of the Millennial Story and how it actually fits in within business isn't a hero's journey, but actually it's a collective journey. It's a journey that I think businesses should be and are very well placed to actually weave this story together of different generations and different hopes, actually to bring out the potential of the human spirit, actually to bring justice to what the human spirit can mean in this world, and for that human spirit to then express itself in solving some of the most pressing issues of our time, but also to express itself in becoming a society of purpose, and a society that is truly fit for the future. And I really look forward to continuing the conversation sort of today and later on, and thank you so much for listening in this space.